Last night, I had a really good circle, and we had a lot of conversations about how everybody was feeling a bit odd. And there were certain nights where sleep doesn't come as easily. And I know a lot of them sleep really well and some don't, but those who sleep really well just felt that they were more awake than usual. And they also were talking about, and maybe you can relate to this, that your thoughts in your head were even more predominant. You couldn't sort of settle them. And also, one of the biggest things is a lot of them felt quite emotional. And that seemed to be, again, a little stronger than usual. And we noticed that as we were talking, that it often happens around the full moon. Now, maybe you've noticed this before, or maybe this is something you've questioned. Is this actually a thing? Does it actually exist, or is it just me? Because part of you wants to brush it off and stay logical, stay grounded. But there's another part, I think, that you can't really ignore. The restlessness. Also, my students were saying they had vivid dreams. And then there's sort of a sense that something inside of you that's more active than usual. I don't know whether that's thoughts or ideas or something, that's going around like a ruminatory thought. So today I thought I wanted to explore this properly. I want us to try to sort of discuss it and maybe understand it a bit better. Because this is not just the odd person. We had 20 in our circle. And they were all, more or less, feeling something that was happening that was different, but something that was happening that occurs when there's a full moon and they're becoming aware of it. Because there is something happening here. And I think once you see it clearly, it starts to feel a lot less unsettling. So let's discuss it. I feel there are certain nights where something feels different. And you might not notice it straight away because it's not always obvious. But there's a restlessness, a sort of edge, a subtle edge to your thoughts, and a feeling that something inside of you is more awake than usual. And often, like I was saying, talking to my group, it seems to happen around the full moon. So do you think there's something there that we need to discuss? Now, whether you've followed moon cycles for years, or whether this is something that you've only just started to notice, I think there's a question there that we need to talk about. And maybe that question is this actually real? Or am I imagining it? Because on one hand, we're told to be rational, grounded, logical. But on the other, you can't ignore what you're feeling, can you? A lot of people were saying that they have a lighter sleep. They're getting more and more vivid dreams. I certainly am. That their emotions seem to rise a little quicker. And they can't ignore them. So today I really want to explore this properly with you. And I want this to be grounded, obviously, but in a way that helps you understand what might be happening in your body, in your mind, and in your awareness. And of course, we know that going way, way back, the word lunacy was coined, wasn't it? And that was in the Victorian era, where a lot of people used to do petty crime during a full moon. It seemed to really spur on emotions in some way, shape, or form. And I know that I used to do talks and teaching with the police for body language. And I know there that they were telling me that during certain times of the month, they seem to have, still petty crimes, they seem to have people doing, silly things, where the rest of the month it would be less obvious. So let's start with something simple. We know, don't we, scientifically, that the moon affects the tides. And we know that that's not a belief. It's actually science. We know that. We know that the gravitation pull of the moon moves entire oceans. Now just pause with that for a moment, because if something can influence vast bodies of water, it's not unreasonable to wonder whether it might also influence us. Because, of course, we are, after all, mostly water. But I think this is where I put my curiosity hat on again, because the effect isn't always crazy obvious. It's really subtle. It's not like a switch flips and suddenly everything changes. It's more subtle than that. But I think that it really does feel as if something is amplified. You might notice that your thoughts feel louder, or that things you've been pushing down suddenly feel harder to ignore. I certainly know that emotions that were manageable feel closer to our attention. And they're not overwhelming necessarily, but they're definitely wanting attention. They're more noticeable. And for some people, I think that shows up in sleep. It changes people's sleep patterns. It makes perhaps falling asleep harder, and staying asleep can feel lighter. Dreams can feel more intense, more symbolic, and sometimes even more memorable. When we wake up, we've got that dream inside of our heads, which doesn't happen a lot, because often as soon as you wake up and you turn over, there's a process that happens in your brain where your brain drops the dream. But I think that when there's a full moon, I've noticed this with clients and with students, that dreams, yes, can feel more intense, but we remember them. And again, I'm questioning this because I'm always curious. Why? From a psychological point of view, which is where I always like to go first, we know that when the mind is more active, sleep becomes lighter. When people are anxious or they're processing something, it definitely is lighter. When there's more internal processing, trying to work things out, sometimes your mind just doesn't switch off just because it's nighttime. It continues. And the full moon, whether you see it as an energetic or environmental or even symbolic, often coincides with a kind of internal bringing things up. It sort of puts the spotlight on certain things that you've been thinking about it, and it's not pushing it. I think it's trying to, like the moon does, illuminating outside. It seems to illuminate things in our minds. Now, I want to be clear here, because I'm not saying that the moon is causing emotions. I'm having a discussion here and trying to work it out. And I think it's about recognizing that there are times when your awareness sharpens, where your system becomes more receptive, where there's been sitting quietly in the background, where what's been sitting quietly in the background almost becomes a little closer into view. And the full moon can act as a marker for that, a moment in the cycle where things feel fuller. And if you've ever felt more emotional around a full moon, and that's certainly one of the things that the students were talking about, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It doesn't mean you're losing control. I think it just means that we are becoming more sensitive. We're noticing more. And there's something I feel that's really quite powerful in that, because most of the time we're moving quickly. Our lives are really speeding up. We're processing life in the background and we're managing to cope and respond. But these moments, these subtle shifts around the full moon, I think they invite us to pause, to feel what's actually there, because it's very obvious that there's something different there, that we're feeling something. So it's almost like to acknowledge something you might not have had space for before. And I think that this awareness matters, because awareness without grounding can feel overwhelming. So that's why I wanted to discuss this here, because if you do notice that around the full moon you feel more sensitive, more awake or more emotional, then we need to question that. And I think one of the questions is, how do we stop this? How do you support yourself through it? And this is where your nervous system comes into play, because your nervous system is always responding to what it perceives. We've spoken about that a lot, haven't we? It's not just externally, but it's internally. Thoughts, emotions, sensations. So when things feel heightened, your system can move into a more alert state. It's a natural thing that your body does. And I think that's where the restlessness comes from. So let's gently look at it. Because we might be looking at things like slowing things down in the evening. Maybe reducing stimulation, even slightly. Less looking on your iPad or TV or reading newspapers or whatever it is that you do that's stimulating. If you give yourself space to process your thoughts rather than carrying them into your sleep, because the fact of the matter is, whatever you put into your mind before you go to sleep, it stays there. Your subconscious mind thinks that you've asked it to sort it out, and your left brain then gets involved and it starts to try to analyze it. So maybe a really good way of helping this is to write things down on a piece of paper. I often say this to my clients, that if you write it down, what's in your head, what's worrying you, on a piece of paper before you go to sleep, then you're sort of placing them outside of your mind, because you're putting what's in your mind out on the piece of paper. It might mean simply acknowledging something feels a bit different tonight, and then that's okay. Because remember, the moment you stop resisting, your system softens, your nervous system softens. And if emotions do come up, instead of letting your left brain analyze them and rationalize them immediately. Just notice them. Let them be there without needing to fix them, because often they're not there to disrupt you. They're there to be recognized. There's also something important about perspective here, because not everything needs to be explained in extremes. You don't have to believe that the full moon is controlling anything. And equally, you don't have to dismiss what you're feeling. You can sort of sit somewhere in the middle. Curious, observant, and grounded. And that's really the space that I want to leave you in today. Not with rigid answers, because I don't have all the answers, of course. I'm just here to motivate you to think about your own answers, but with a deeper understanding of your own experience. So the next time the full moon comes around, instead of bracing for it or ignoring it completely, just be in the present moment and notice. Notice how you feel physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Notice your energy. Notice your thoughts. And I don't want you to analyze them and judge them, because there's a difference between being overwhelmed by something and being aware of it. And if you can stay in that awareness, whilst also staying connected to yourself, then nothing about this becomes something to fear. It simply becomes another rhythm, another moment in the cycle, another opportunity, maybe to understand yourself a little more deeply. And that more than anything, I think that's where your power sits. Now, if this resonates with you, and you're starting to notice these patterns in yourself, I go much deeper into this kind of awareness, intuition, and understanding inside my private podcast, where I tend to go a lot deeper and where we explore this properly in a grounded, supported way. And you can find the details in the show notes if you choose to join. Anyway, take care of yourself, and especially tonight. Before we finish today, I want to share something with you. Over the past few months, I've had a lot of people get in touch to say how valuable they find these episodes, and to ask how they can go a bit deeper or learn more. I've been recording this podcast weekly for a long time now, and the conversations have naturally become more reflective and more in depth. It's work I genuinely love and care about, and I've realised it's time to create a space where that kind of weekly content can be supported properly. So I'm launching a private podcast with weekly episodes available for subscribers at £5.99 per month. The public podcast isn't going anywhere, but it will now only be one episode per month instead of weekly. That monthly episode will stay exactly as it is now, thoughtful, grounded, and freely available. The private podcast is for those of you who listen regularly and want ongoing weekly content, deeper conversations, and ideas that build over time. There's no pressure to join. This is simply an option. If it's right for you, you're very, very welcome. If not, I'm glad you're here, and that won't change. All the details are in the show notes so that you can take a look when it suits you. Thank you again, as always, for listening and for being part of this space.